Hello, and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm Heather Parsons, your host, a serial entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and a business strategist. I've spent several years juggling business, family life, and helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators about what actually moves the needle in business. No fluff, no filler, just smart strategy, systems that work, and insights you can put to use right away. With that, let's dive right in. Today, I have Connor Ellison on the show. Connor is the founder and CEO at POGR, where they are revolutionary in the gaming industry, providing gaming statistics, player profiles, and developer empowerment in one easy package. In this episode, we'll dive into several things to include starting a business, venture capital, and much more. Connor, welcome to the show.
Hi, happy to be here.
Glad you're here. So, I know you and I talked a little bit. I'd love to hear kind of how you got started as an entrepreneur.
Sure. It goes back to when I was 16. It's when I started my first company. I'm 29 now, so it's been a little over a decade. My first company was essentially drop shipping. Before drop shipping, I was selling different things that I bought overseas on the internet, and kind of just taking advantage of like the early wave of like having an online business while also being able to sell it in person. I made a little over $10,000 at 16, which was really nice before I went to college. And then I had multiple other businesses there when I was in school. I did artist management and I managed two bands, early Spotify days because they were paying a lot of money. And I have my artists like headline at the Roxy in LA, go on sold out shows on a tour. All of this is like managed without a like record label or agency behind. We went to school in New Orleans, so it was a little easier. Most bars per capita, and those bars need live music. So yeah, it's been a long journey. I didn't get into the tech space until I was about 23. And I got into the gaming space. I was involved with FaZe Clan and a digital agency that managed campaigns for influencers. And that company was building its first kind of like standalone platform. Test it with your own ecosystem, and then like if it works, spread it out to others. And then yeah, from there I just started other stuff specifically in gaming. So
Okay, that's great. One of the questions, as you're talking there and running a business while going to college, I'd love your thoughts on how college has kind of impacted you running a business and what you're doing today.
yeah, I mean, college is definitely tricky. I didn't go truthfully to like really get an education. Like I went to spend time in a different city, like already gotten that like first hit of I can create my own company. My parents really wanted me to go to school, and I got a really great scholarship, a business scholarship to University of New Orleans. And when I went there, I was just kind of like open to like whatever came to me, and there was a big music hub. So I just used my experience of pretty much running what I thought was a good business when I was younger, found artists that I felt were talented enough, and like mainly singer songwriters who were able to like make their own music. We had all the free tools, like we had studios, mixing, and all of the bells and whistles from my college. So we would just utilize those to make really low cost records, put them out on Spotify. This is back when Spotify was paying like thousands of dollars per 100,000 plays, the good old days. So once that started to pick up, I got a lot of leeway from my professors and everything. They would reference me in class and like my artists because, it's a very music dominant education. I was in the music business program. I originally started in college at the international business, but when I saw that the best education there would be for music business, I did that. And I kind of just self-taught, like, I really made use of mentors and people in the city. And I didn't really just like I wasn't content with just like what was being taught to me in class. I really wanted to go out and kind of like create my own like idea of what like I felt a good artist manager was and how to succeed in this space. It was new because like it was always previous, like a lot of the education was like you have to burn CDs, you have to have a thumb drive, you have to like send this out, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And like there's like a lot of upfront costs for that. And they're like teaching like how to balance it. And I was just like, no, like we're just gonna only do streaming, you know, like we're just gonna focus on that. We're gonna have a song, we're gonna put it out there, and it's just reoccurring revenue as long as it's up there and as long as the streaming platforms are paying out. So I did that. Like I said, didn't really focus on like my education too much. I was C student except for law. You know, like my law classes, I really leaned into because I felt like that was going to be useful. And having such a great professor there, Tim Capel, like shout out to you, man. He really made it fun because he was a practicing lawyer and he would bring like his actual active cases in, and like he would obviously like black out a lot of the important sensitive details, but you could understand, and we could like play this imaginary game of like what you would do. And it really just brought and made me more comfortable with contracts, and I've used that throughout the rest of my career. But yeah, it was just like kind of creating my own lane in the space in music. And from there, I graduated early, went straight to Atlantic Records, was doing A&R there while managing my artists. And it was great until I realized when I got a full-time offer, I was like, this is it. Like money wise, I was like, I'm making more money on my own. And like I would be giving up a lot more of my time, which I valued a lot more, especially at this young age. So yeah, I got out of the music industry, kind of like chilled for a second to figure out my next step. And this is around the time gaming was really starting to take off. And I had always been familiar with like FaZe Clan, and like I reached out to them and I was applying constantly, and I finally got hired there, as well as my boss who had hired me had a digital agency for gamers. So I kind of did both of those at the same time simultaneously, and that's where I really started to pick up speed and see what the possibilities were.
I love that. You know, as somebody who also didn't go the traditional route from a school perspective, I joined the military right out of high school. College wasn't really a thought for me to start with. It
Yeah.
took me much later in life. You know, I love what you're talking about being self taught. I think, you know, going to college is a great jumping off place. It's a great
Hmm.
place to go if you don't have some of those mentors or you're not really sure where you want to lean in. I think it's wonderful. But I think there's so much more free education out there. Things like
Yeah.
podcasts and mentorship programs and all the other things that there's no limit. If you want to learn something and you're willing to dig in, do it.
100%. I also feel like school sets this like one size fit all pace. And like in some places, I wasn't as fast as others. And in other places, I was much, much faster than others. So kind of this just like difference in that really didn't like sit well with me. I'm not great with authority figures either. Like that, like I'm all for respect. You know, if you can teach me something, like I'll be your biggest disciple, you know, but like if I feel like what you're teaching me isn't valuable, like I said, like I value my time over everything else. You know, you only have so much of it, and like for me it's like I want to eventually, like my goals after this is like family and everything like that. So I want to make sure that I use all my time accordingly, selfishly, but also like deliver the best results in the space. So yeah, it was tough through high school and college, you know, like with like the different little battles that I had with different teachers or X, Y, and Z. But now looking back, I'm glad I did it and like went through kind of like what I felt like an outcast a little bit or an outlier. You know, it's like I'm not getting the same grades as my brother or other people in my like, you know, community. But it's just like now looking back, like over 10 years later, you know, from when I graduated high school, I just in a really great spot with complete control over my life, you know, so.
Absolutely. You know, and I think the more entrepreneurs I talk to, the more I hear a very consistent theme. It's that trouble with authority a little bit, but it's also, you know, I'll just speak for myself. I need to know the why, and I
Yeah.
need to know why it's valuable. Like, I don't want to necessarily spend loads of my time on some theory from, you know, 50 years ago that doesn't really apply today. And I think that the world we live in, especially in the tech space, evolves so quickly that
Yeah.
if we're not very careful, that a lot of the information that we get is really outdated. Just like around how
Exactly.
we develop software. You know, 10 years ago, software was developed and accounted for and treated very differently than the way we do it today. I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, with AI especially, like you can just create base level products with next to no money and next to no time and then build on top of it. I feel like the main like software like traditional software pathways have kind of like are dried up, they've kind of vanished. There's no, like everyone was like, oh, you got to go and learn computer science or you got to become a software engineer. And now it's like so hard to get an even a junior level position in those roles because it's just like technology is moving at a faster pace than like colleges are preparing people to come out. They come out with this like kind of idea of like, oh, I have a degree, I understand languages, but it's like, what have you applied that to that shows that like we don't have to train you or spend all this extra time getting you ready to go. It's like you could just use a co-pilot of one of these like big five companies and that all have their special niches, and it's like you can then just kind of build at your own pace without having the downtime of having to train someone, and that model never leaves you. So it's like, well, when you're investing all this time and energy and resources into younger talent, and then you have this on this other side, you have this like AI companion that is getting smarter as you put more time into it, and it's like you own it. It's like it's part of one of these things that's like part of your like IP for your company, and like you can just build from there. And it's like it's just a new world we live in. And I mentor a bunch of kids who are in college right now, and they feel the same way that I felt, but like I'm even more worried for them because it's like the offerings that a college gives, and like trust me, like college was the best time of my life. It was like the last time I like really like was able to like fully immerse myself into a community and like spend time with my peers and everything. Now I just sit on my computer all day. Like I live alone. It's me and my dog and my team that's all international. No one on my team lives in my same state. So it's there's benefits to both, but it's just like you have to be really honest with yourself on what you're trying to get out. And like you mentioned, your why. It's like, why am I here? Am I here to like get an education? And am I here for just like community before I grind for the next 10 years and I want to have some fun in a new place? Like that's fine. Like that's I say that I was honest with my parents. I was like, I'll go to college for you and like I'll do well, but it's like I'm I'm going here to like have a little bit of fun and also like and like New Orleans is a great place, but I was like I was very clear like when I came back and graduated it was just straight to work. I didn't like lollygag or like spend like my resources for someone else. I just went straight to like living extremely frugally, walking dogs, being a babysitter, selling stuff on the internet, all of these things to like reach this very low burn rate that I had to like keep myself afloat. And I highly recommend people like understand like what their goals are when you're like a young adult going through college. And it's like, okay, like being honest with yourself is great. Don't try and be like, oh, like I'm going to go to college to do X, Y, and Z, but like you're going out every weekend and you're drinking. It's like, that's great. Like if you're like, hey, like I'm going to party for 2-3 years and then like I'm going to come back and like when I become like an adult in society, I'm going to give it my all and not go out those extra days. Spend my time investing in my own skills, self-teaching. Like I've listened to every episode of How I Built This, Acquired. I'm on to a new podcast, Founders. It's like there's resources out there. And then anytime you're curious, someone has a Reddit thread on it, someone has a YouTube video on it. So like follow curiosities and like just like, yeah, build your own way of learning, because like if you decide learning stops after school, like you're screwed. So
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you said I find really interesting. So, as somebody who has been in the hiring process for large companies, when it comes to people coming out of college and, people who are really or re-entering the workforce, a couple of things that I find most interesting is finding the people who are curious and who can speak multiple languages. Because if all you know how to do is programming, whenever you come to talk to somebody in the finance department like myself, we're going to have a problem, right?
yeah.
But if you're curious enough to figure out how the system works, why it's set up the way it is, and then you can translate between the two languages, you almost create a position for yourself where you're indispensable. Like we
Yep.
could not do without you. Because I
Yep.
think that's the part as we lean in more towards AI and having all of these great tools, it's the human part that I don't think we're going to be able to replace. Like taking my
Yeah. Connecting the
requirements.
dots. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say connecting the dots is exactly it, because you have all these great tools, but how do you make sure that they work in multiple different applications? If like you're using AI, it's like you have to understand what you're inputting, you know? It's not like a one size fits all, like, oh, I have this AI and it's going to do my job for me. You know, maybe on very base level things like kids going through school who use AI to just get test scores, you know, or like write their essays, you know, that's there because it's been trained on a lot. But like when you're going to the more niche paths and things that will like actually bring you wealth, you have to have some sort of expertise to be able to utilize it to the best of your ability. And then exactly like you're saying, for me, like I'm more on the sales route. You know, it's like I manage bigger deals, I handle the finance, I handle the operations, but like I have a team of all developers. So it's like you need to understand how to speak their language, get the best out of them, understand their strengths and weaknesses, and making sure that like you're able to immerse yourself without feeling like clueless, you know? So it's like yeah, curiosity, making sure that you like are aware of your weaknesses and like your strengths of your team, and like making sure that you are a melting pot to help everyone become the best version, then you're indispensable, you know, because it's like if they take you out, then they're ruining this like really nice pipeline of efficiency, you know? So
Absolutely. And I'd also love to hear your thoughts a little bit on kind of somebody who's coming out of college, going into being an entrepreneur, and then managing a global team. So you're talking about having people around the world who are doing this development work. What are some strategies or things that you've learned to kind of make that easier and really get what you need out of your employees?
if you're planning to work internationally, like figure out when you can take naps during the day, because like it's like you have to understand like one of you guys, if you guys are working on the same timeline, like someone is like having a screwed up sleep schedule, and if you want the best people, you have to let them work in their time frame and their time zone, and then you have to close the gap. So if they're working in the UK, or they're working in India, or they're working somewhere else, be prepared to be up at 5 6 a.m. like ready to go to like help understand what they've done to the day, what you need to do before the next time they wake up, and then being able to wake up or stay up later at night so that when they wake up, you can pass off that baton again for like this seamless 24-hour work cycle. It can be used very efficiently, but it's just like I've really accepted that most nights I won't get more than 5 6 hours of sleep. You know, it's like I have to like make up that difference, because sleep is important when you're like starting to grind. So it's like you have to make that difference up in the nap, like in the afternoon. So it's like some people are getting off work. It's like I'm napping, you know, and then it's just like I'm back to work. So it's like you just have to like, I think the biggest thing is just be honest with yourself. And like if you do want to go down this entrepreneur path, it isn't like glorious, you know. It's like it's there's a lot of like sacrifice involved. I heard a quote where it's like sacrifice is giving up something good for something better, and like you have to like understand that it's like, all right, like we've raised, like we're like a top 1% of companies, because like not only did we raise money, but we were able to pay some of our team six figures. You know, we've raised millions of dollars at a good valuation, and still it's like a uphill battle constantly. It's not like, oh, you raise this money and you win. It's like, okay, what are you going to do with that money? Because it's like the first money out of all of the money you get is the easiest, because it's usually idea based, like very early MVP, and people are looking towards the vision. If you don't execute on like what they were expecting, it's a lot harder to get to that next round, because it's all revenue based, it's all like metrics driven. So it's like you can have the best pitch, the best company idea, and like the best vision, but like if 2 years down the line when you're running out of money, if you don't have a story that is metrics backed, then it's like you're going to have a hard time. So it's like raising is extremely hard. A lot of companies don't even get to that phase, but it's like you can't be like, oh, I'm gonna like take my foot off the gas, I'm gonna spend money traveling, doing X, Y, and Z. Like, don't get me wrong, we go to conferences, like we make sure that like our team has moments where they can just like be away from screens and like talk in person and like have these moments to, like recharge. But like that's like a fraction, a micro fraction of like your year. You know, it's like don't expect 2 weeks of vacation. Don't expect this. Don't expect paying tied off, especially if you're an equity partner in the company of some asset. You know, it's just like that equity is like essentially your promise to them that you're going to do what it takes to like get this to be worth something. So, I would say like, yeah, like making sure that you're just like ready to like actually do this. And like if you listen to a lot of these founders, like they have a common theme. It's like they've overcome extreme hurdles and they've made themselves available 24/7. If you have a partner or kids, like it's going to be much more difficult, but like make sure they're on board, because it's not just about you at that time. My business partner has wife and kids. My other one like has nieces and nephews and a mom that he takes care of. So it's like, but everyone's on board for the same vision, because they understand that we're building something that everyone's aligned on, So it's like, you have to understand that. Like, I'm thankfully where I can just be like fully selfish, fully single, young guy. And it's like, I could just like just lock in, and like, I don't really have any repercussions, So
For sure. As an entrepreneur who owns multiple businesses, one of the things that I've noticed is, even on vacation, I was lucky enough to be traveling for the last couple of weeks. Even while we're away, I'm still checking email, still checking in
yeah,
with my team, and it gets back to that flexibility, like you're talking about, around being an entrepreneur has a lot of freedoms and comes with a lot of different challenges, but it also comes with a lot of different rewards. So you can
yeah,
do that nap in the afternoon. I can work while I'm in Europe hanging out with friends. I can do all of these things. It's just about kind of keeping your eye on the ball
yeah,
and not dropping the big ticket items while you're doing
yep.
it.
Yeah,
And
and just being honest, like it's like if you go on vacation, but you have three big things that you need to push through, it's not like, oh, like someone else will handle that. It's like, no, you have to do that while you're on vacation. You're lucky that you can do both on vacation, but like might have to like not go and do the long nights, that you might have to miss out on a couple lunches or breakfast to make sure that you can knock stuff out. Like, I think honesty with yourself is the most important thing as an entrepreneur, because it's like, what you have to do. If you're a good entrepreneur, like good business owner, you know what you have to do. You have a long to-do list. You have a long sheet of things that you need to do. And not all of those need to be done while you're gone. It's like making sure that you can recharge and like have some semblance of a life during this is like important. But at the end of the day, it's like if you have a client reaching out on the day that you leave for your vacation and they're like, you need to have this done, like, what are you going to make them wait until you're back? Like, it's just like,
no,
if you're yeah, so it's like if you're lucky enough to have a team that can like step in and cover it, you can, but that's not always the case, because when you're in a startup, you like are diversifying your skills, and it's just like, yeah, you just have to be honest with yourself and make sure that you like are ready to like, you make that promise to yourself that like, hey, I'm going to do this for whatever, like I gave myself 10 years. I was like, hey, you got 10 years, you're just going to lock in. And if you like fuck up, like that's on you. It's like you obviously didn't make the right decisions along the way, so
absolutely. And I think, in addition to that honesty, it's also about communication and transparency, right? Like, hey, not telling people last minute that you're going to be away, but giving them a month's notice. Hey, going to be traveling, may have a slower response, but if you need anything, if you can get it to me before this date, easy turnaround. Or, it may be a little bit slower getting back to you, but it's all about that being
yeah,
dedicated, pushing through, doing the hard things. And I would love to dive into how you prepared on the VC route. I think that's
sure.
something that loads of people have lots of questions around. And how did you get your business to be ready for that first round? And then what are some of the tools and metrics you put in place to be ready for the next round coming up? Because I truly believe whenever we're looking at metrics, we want things that really matter and drive the business, not just things that look pretty on a scorecard.
Yeah. So like just flashing back to when we were starting this out, I had savings, it's like I had about like $70,000 of my own money that I was willing to like go all in on this. I had just finished like back to back decent, well paying jobs. And I felt like I had the expertise, and I had just been introduced to my technical co-founder, Randolph. So I had the pieces that I needed. I felt like at the time to like take that leap. I felt like gaming was getting to this place and technology was evolving. So there's like generation one of game development, and then there's generation two. And I felt like there wasn't anyone servicing that. So it just made a lot of sense. And I had the team to do it. I feel like you need to have a very specific goal at this time. Like it's like there's big companies out there. There's like the big 5, big 10 companies. So it's like, you have to build things that they either want to acquire, or it's like hard for them to like challenge you in, because it's just so niche. It's not a big enough market size for their board to like, they're like, why would we compete with this? Like, we're making $50 billion like a year annually with like great margins. Like, let them do it. And if they get big enough, we'll acquire you. So it's like, understand how you're approaching it and what you're approaching it. And it's like, if you're building an AI tool right now, it's like, I would make sure that you're going through and someone bigger isn't doing that same thing, because they have more money, more data, and like they can just lose money to beat you to market. Amazon's been known to do that a lot. Like, they are great at, like identifying the next big things and then making sure that like they're ruthless in like the most respectful way to get there and achieve that like kind of like majority stake in that market. So we had a lot of like brainstorming and understanding of like how we wanted to do it. And when we finally decided, it was this kind of like profile system backed by software. So the software allows this new generation of indie developers that are being unserviced to utilize it. All of that data funnels into a profile system, and that profile system becomes very granular, much more valuable. And then you can build on top of that. It's like there's tons of things that can be benefited by the gaming space. Let's say you're trying to have better matchmaking. You can close and lock matchmaking to like where people are verified on our side. It's like, okay, no hackers, no toxicity. There's like children like servers, there's adult servers, like that's one thing. Let's say you're a new game studio and you're like trying to figure out who should test your game. Like, the current model is really outdated, in my opinion, where you have these big influencers and their communities push these games. It's a big amount of traffic, and then it all tapers off because they follow them to the next. So it's like, by going through us, you're able to like understand what the target audience is. We have player history. So like you can get invites to those players through us to be able to like better service your game. So it's like you start finding all of these little things that chip off on top of our like infrastructure and foundation. So that was kind of our like pitch, and like our whole idea. And we went first to an accelerator. We are all first time founders. Like, I've been building founders, like being a founder before, but I wasn't venture backed. I had like friends and family rounds on my other startups and stuff like that, and like small wins, but like nothing that would garner the respect of skipping this like early step and going straight to like a $1 to $2 million round right out the get go. I'm not ex Google. I'm not like at that point it was like big on crypto, so it wasn't like I wasn't like doing crypto for years. I didn't have like a back channel for that, so it was like we went to Forum Ventures. Love that. I recommend any up and coming startups to check them out. They also have a lot of like partners that are also on the early stage fundraising, and they gave us our first $125,000. Which was really helpful, because it was like that included with like the money that I had allowed us to like have runway for like a year and a half, because it was a small team. It was just me, my two other founders, our designer, and someone who was helping us set up our social and branding, and like everyone was like taking extremely cut rates. They could like, my other two founders were working other jobs. I was the only one really full time on this, and I wasn't paying myself. So it was just like, there's just like, you have to understand like what you're getting in store. Like, my life changed. Like, I went out less, I wasn't going to birthday parties. Like, I wasn't doing all these things. And like, you just have to like understand that it's like, all right, you have to like be willing to make these sacrifices, because at this early stage, these investors are investing in you. At this very first round, like, who's your team? What's your approach? Why should they give money to you instead of the thousands of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of other founders with ideas? So they only invest, every fund only invests in like, let's say 10 to 20 companies in a year, if you're lucky, on like the smaller side. Maybe some are more, but like that's like the average I've kind of seen. So identify like people who write checks. There's things like Crunchbase. There's like a bunch of people on LinkedIn who post threads. It's not that hard if you're like good at like finding stuff up. I haven't really used AI yet, but I'm assuming AI could probably also help you find people that like have the right check size, are making active investments in your range. So like figure that out. And then I'm just good at cold emailing. It's like, like that's one of the skills I have. It's like, you like I was raising this and building this during COVID. So like it was more acceptable. Before it was like I didn't have to do the road show and do X, Y, and Z, fly out to New York, have this huge burn rate for like nothing, and going back in a plane like empty, like because my 10 meetings didn't work. It was just like I'd work all day. At night I'd send out all these emails, wake up to like yeses, nos, unsubscribe, stop messaging me, like whatever the like response was. And the people that did want to talk, I just make sure that I had a good pitch. And like I think it took about 1,000 emails till I finally got the thumbs up from Form Ventures. Jonah, like our managing director, he got the pass from one of his analysts, and he really liked what we were doing. He liked our idea, and like we were accepting their accelerator. And like the perks of an accelerator is like they help you for the like next 6 months. They help you go into your next raise. They help answer questions. They bring in founders who have sold companies, who are in Series B, Series A, to like allow you to answer it. And like it's such a small cohort, it was like 20 startups. It was like if you like take that initiative and reach out to them, like all of them will talk one-on-one to you. Founders like helping other founders, as long as they don't feel like they're wasting their time or talking to deaf ears, as long as you like really take it. Because then it's like if you succeed, then they've expanded their market in a way, and it's a very like tough industry to like build one in because of like the churn rate. It's like one moment you could be a big company, next moment you can't raise money and your burn's too big, and then your company goes solvent. It's like there's a lot of stuff. So it's like you kind of got to stick together and help in that space. So that was like the early first side, like fake, like cold emailing is like what got me through everything. Then I had a small angel investment in between the accelerator to our pre-seed round. And that was from a guy I actually met out at a party. It was like a networking party thing. I'm in LA, so it's like you never know who you can meet when you're out. And I got to talking to him about like what I was doing, and he's just like, "Hey man, like I really like what you're doing. Like let's set up a call." And like 2-3 calls later, he wrote a check. Super easy. It's really easy to do angel investments because like it's just that person's money without like any fund requirements, allocation requirements, etc. It's like if you guys can agree on terms and he likes your vision, then you can go from there. We reach to them every day, and angels can be great because like if they're allocating their own money, they're probably have done well in their life. So it's like they have their own network, they can kind of move at their own pace. And I really like it's really much harder to find them. Like, finding them in person is kind of just like one of those, like if you tell the universe your path, it'll help you along. So I was like really adamant on what I wanted and got introduced. That was a lucky one because like we were at this point, like getting close to the end of our burn, and like we weren't even close to like what we required as our MVP to like go to this next round. So like that little bit really like softened it. Like obviously like we were paying ourselves nothing, but we paid ourselves even less during this time to make sure that we could get to this round. Cause like rounds aren't also like, hey, like we like your company, like we're gonna do this right away. And there's lawyers involved. There's like that's an expense. Like there's all these things that are on top of that, especially when you get to the bigger checks. Like so we raised these first 2 rounds. And then we're getting towards the end of our accelerator. Everyone in our company is running fundraising. And like, thankfully, like, this is one of the other things where it's like, you got to think timing sometimes. Like we're in a bull market, like everything was big up to the right, and like there's just so much money being pushed into venture capital to capitalize on these big winners, And we had a unique pitch. It wasn't really like what everyone, it wasn't this like crypto adjacent company, which was like really, they were really raising large rounds. But we did find, and this is probably where I sent like 10,000 plus emails. Like I talked about this in a couple other my podcasts that I've been in. And it's empty, it's like you just are like having so many people just be like, I don't believe in your dreams, like I don't think you can do it, and like you just can't stop until you get a yes. Because I realized I was like, if I stop, like no one's gonna pick up where I left off. It's like the dream just dies and you're just done. So it's like you kind of have to be delusional. You kind of have to have a little bit of an ego where it's like, I know I'm right and all of these people are wrong, and like just keep at it, like constantly doing it. It was like every single night, every single day. I was just like, this was like my number one goal. And I eventually found someone. It was a Porva. He was part of venture capital, not venture capital. He was a venture capitalist, part of Venture Rock, who gave us our $2.25 million investment at a $20 million valuation, which was really great. And it was a really quick thing, after like going through, quick in the sense of like getting to the term sheet versus like when we had talked to other investors who were interested, there'd be like 3 meetings before they even mentioned the word term sheet. This one was like, had our initial call. He set up the next one with my calendar link from my email. There was like managing director of the fund on it. That went really good. 2 offline sets of like questions that we're answering about like what our 135 is. It's like how we see ourselves like as a competitive answer, like to like other companies potentially coming out in this space. And like they liked our answers, like we spent a lot of time doing it, and we were also very quick. It's like not like, oh, we're sitting on this for a week and we're having this person check. It was like, no, like we'd go through it. Like the moment we got the email, we'd like sleep on it, and then the next day if we felt good, we'd send it. It's like you're the one who knows your company best. Like your friend's dad or like your lawyer or like something, like they're just gonna like contaminate your like thought process and your vision, because it's like they don't know what you're going through and what you're building. So you just have to be honest. And if they don't like it, like that's okay. Someone will, if it's, meant to be for this platform. And I'm really a big believer in like, you don't fail, you just stop, And after we answered those questions, then we got into the term sheet negotiation part. And like we used lawyers that were introduced to us by our accelerator. Expect to pay like $10,000 to $30,000 for a term sheet. There's a lot of things that go into this. Like they're like many pages. It's like you have to deal with this. It wasn't just that, as well as like we had to like make sure our company was set up properly to like make sure that we were ready to receive investment. And then it was like making sure that we had like our disclaimers, our oh my God, just a bunch of our policies, like everything, making sure that like we're a great company moving into this. And then, yeah, secured the term sheet, went back and forth. And like, even with that being quick, it still took 2 months, and yeah, it was just one of those like, okay, now we did this, and it's like we got a little celebrate, pat on our back, but then it was just back to work. We had to hire out more people, we had to train them, we had to like really go and accomplish it, because like we had an MVP of like a big infrastructure play. So our investors knew, and it was a hard sell, because like we're a J curve company. It's like we get all this money and it's like we spend. Oh, okay, like now it's looking a little better,
Yep.
because it's like there's like we have to build out all the software. We have to build out everything in-house, like for our suite. Some companies are like, oh, we get the money, let's do a purchase order, and then we're off to the races. Like that's not what it is when you're building this like kind of like more technical focused, software heavy company. So doing that, like we've been building for 2-ish years, like since that raise. We have enough money to get us through this year, and then we're already like talking to like previous investors to like set up this next wave. We're on board, like we're just now onboarding paying clients. We've had people that we've been testing with previously, and like they've been helping us. It's like we kind of traded our software for free for feedback of like QAing and people giving us like how to fix and make our product better for like this scale release. And now we're really leaning into like, okay, like we're getting actualized by some pretty big players for like what we've built. It's like once again, timing plays a huge role into it. We didn't know when we built this company that AI was going to be where it is now. But now that it is, it's like we're even more important player. Like what I thought of us is like, yeah, like middle to top of the pack of startups, realistically, because there's always like bigger players with previous founders or like anything like that, to like, I consider us one of the top potential startups out there right now, just because of like first to market advantage, software that is like completely built in house, that isn't dependent on anything else. It's like it makes us very appealing for acquisition, because we can like our stack is integratable into like a lot of the big players' systems. Like shout out to my CTO Randolph, like he really made sure that this was able to go to serve a small indie developer all the way to like an enterprise level with multiple different inputs coming in from like all of their different services in house. So yeah, it's a long road. Like just be ready to like have a lot of people shut the door on you if you're not good with rejection. Like 100% do not do this. Like you're gonna have a bad time. But if you're like one of those people who's just like, I know I'm right, I'm going to prove that I'm right by outworking other people, then you're going to be in a really good spot. And get good at like doing cold emails. Don't also just spam people. Don't like write these regurgitated automated messages with a click funnel that they all say online. It's much better to write one email. It's like, hey, like I saw that you invested in this company. Like I listened to your podcast and I think that this is like something that you'd really want to pay attention to. If there's any interest, like I'd love to set up a call next week. And it's like, you send like a one page or something that they can easily digest. And it's just like, that has a lot. Like I was having like 80% open rate, 90% open rate. And like at one point in time when I was hitting my stride later, like 40% response rate. And it's like, don't be afraid if someone's like, hey, that's not really interested. Be like, hey, do you know someone that would be interested? That has a much lower rate. Sometimes they won't respond, but it's like I got 20 to 30 intros from that. They all add up, and you just got to keep going. There's always more investors. There's always more family offices. Like it's an international playing field. So it's like if you go through all the big US investors, go international. Like as long as they don't have a mandate with their fund that they can only invest in certain geographies, like, it's fair game. They all want to like work with US companies because they see a lot of innovation is coming out of here. So, yeah, I think that's the answer.
That's a great answer. And I think whenever there's so much to unpack there. So kind of going back to the very beginning, I heard loads of consistent things, bringing your own money to the table, not taking a paycheck, you all having skin in the game, I'm sure helped move you to the top of the pile and building your credibility. And then on top of that, actually following through. Not just bringing a good idea to the table, but actually doing what you said you're going to do. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your structure and what you did internally and operationally to be attractive and ready for that investment. Because I know there's usually a laundry list of things around accounting practices and other operational activities that need to take place in order to be investor ready.
Yeah, I mean, to be investor ready, like on the earliest side, like it really is, it's like three things. It's like, who's the founding team? It's like, can you guys build this without any outside help? Like that has to be the main thing. Like if you're in your pitch anywhere is like, hey, we're going to hire a software house to do this, like you're going to get a big fat no. So it's like, because it's just not a good use of resources. Like you're trading your time for this equity and using the little money that they give you for contract work, for services that you need to start, for like making this business operatable. So it's like you have to have a founding team that's able to complete at least the MVP. Like we worked with a great software house that was part of our investors, like after we raised a $2 million round, because there's more capital to deploy and speed is more important than like precision, So it's like, make sure that you have a team early on. Make sure that you have a clear and concise vision. Using buzzwords X, Y, and Z, like we're the AI for this, we're the Uber for this, like sure, but like be able to like explain like how you're gonna go after your like if you can't understand how to get your first customer or like your first 1,000 customers, that like it's like without your main thing being like we're gonna just charge less, like that's like you're not gonna get super far. It's like ours was like no one's building this. The people that are, since it's an infrastructure play, they'd have to rebuild from the ground up, which is really hard because they've invested enough to where there's a board and it doesn't seem like a big ROI. It's just like there's a huge growing market that's doubling every year of indie developers. And as we're approaching this like new wave of technology, games will be able to be made a lot faster without as much of a head count. And like they need these additional tools that didn't exist for the indie developer versus the triple A's, the double A's, and like the kind of like small to medium sized studios that like have some sort of like investment behind them. This is the age of indie developers, and like we saw this coming like 4 years before. It's like we didn't realize how prominent AI would be, but like we knew that like indie developers were changing, because my business partner was an indie developer. He was making games himself and he showed how possible it was, and like all his friends were doing it, and it's like they just needed tools. So it's like team, super clear and precise vision, not just for the long term but the short term. Like how do you like even get into the industry? And then I would just say like the last thing is like making sure you know what like your V1 looks like, you know, your MVP, like, because it's like you can have this great vision, but like you only have so much time. And like, trust me, it's like someone said this to me and it's like never rang more true. It's like no matter how much you plan or budget, it's going to take twice as long and cost twice as much. So it's like figure out what's the least amount of features you need to like be able to service your first customers. Make sure that like you can get to those first customers as early as possible so you can like help your bottom line, and make sure that you're very clear on like, because is this a must have or a nice to have, you know, like with every single thing. And this is where it's like telling yourself the truth is great. I will be the first to admit I learned this the hard way. I had a lot of nice to have things that looked pretty and were great, but it's like when you really peeled back the layers, like these are still in our to-do list, because it's like we realized very early on that it's like, okay, we have things that are much more commercially viable to these developers that we can build faster and make money off of than having to like do all of the bells and whistles for this perfect product. You know, the perfect product comes over 5 to 10 years, depending on like what industry you're in, you know, or like kind of like the size of your team, et cetera. But like if you're a smaller team, it's like you have to like build the feature, ship the feature, test the feature, make sure that like you are able to like put it out there and then get feedback and update those changes. So it's just like, yeah, it's like team, vision, and like how you're approaching the market and like how you're piercing that, and then like what your MVP looks like, and like make it like what is the bare minimum you need for someone to pay you money. Like that's like pretty much a good idea of like what you need.
I love it. So that makes loads of sense for the first initial round. As you're getting in a little bit further and you're going for this like $2.5 million investment, what are some of the KPIs that they're looking at? Are they just looking at like your net profit, or what are they really trying to look at to say, okay, you've been through a couple of rounds, you've been around the block a time or two, now we're ready to really advance and scale up? What else are they looking at to say, okay, this is still a viable product and we see it going forward to the future?
Yeah, this is where my company's a little different than others. So this might not help. I'll try and speculate on others just from like venture capitalists that I talked to that were just like explaining what they wanted. But those metrics have also changed. Like we were going to be built, like we're a J curve company. Like we were going to be, we didn't make a single dollar when we raised our 2.5 million. Like we just had the MVP. We had very interested like customer profiles and people who would pay for it, you know, if it came out. But it's like we really broke down from a tech, like we're a very tech-based company. Everyone on my team is a software developer but me, you know. It's like, so it's like we made sure that like we really outlined how this infrastructure looks, how that we can take on this market, what's the budget we need in the timeline and the feature set that's being delivered, so that like when we do get to the point like this round that we're raising right now, which is metrics driven to get to this next round because we spent the time building it. But it's like also like when you're like projecting it, what do your margins look like? If you build this, like how much are you making over time? Like what is your like future projections looking like based off of like what other people are spending? And when you're like just because we're not like having paying customers doesn't mean we can't reach out to tons of people and get their feedback. Is this something you pay for? How much would you pay for it? What are you currently using? You know, all that information helps provide clarity for when you are, because like we had a lot of those where we showed to our investors like, hey, like you can even talk to these developers that want to use it. They like need this type of service. And after they did that a couple times, like they're like, okay, these guys are right. You know, it's like it's going to take some upfront capital to get to this spot. But it's like when it's there, it's like they have extremely good margins. They have a super competitive moat that people are going to have to like, it's not an easy like, oh, we can just outspend you. You know, it's like you'd have to outbuild us after we're live. And like there's a lot of delicacies within creating what we created, you know? So that's for us. For like typical, I would say companies that maybe aren't as software focused, like you should be looking at like what your monthly reoccurring revenue is. And like that can be anywhere from like, hey, like we have two like customers paying us like $1,000 a month, you know, and like we have like a pathway to get to 10 to 100. You know, we're just raising this money to be able to like better serve our customers and our pathway. Or if you're like on the smaller servicing of like the $10, $20 a person, it's like try and get to the numbers to where it's like you have like at least $1,000 in reoccurring revenue and a pathway that you can easily explain on like why this is necessary and how their money is going to help you get there, you know? So it's like that's the main thing. Like for these like early rounds before you're really raising a seed round, series A, which I feel like are more metrics driven, like the accelerator and pre-seed, there's a lot of grace and slack given by investors as long as you have the vision and like especially for pre-seed, you have those like early customer profiles and like people agreeing that like, hey, this is important and it needs to be there in the world. And if the investors do their own research, they have analysts, if they're like, yeah, there isn't anything like this and these people are saying they want it, then it's like they kind of just see like, okay, this is money, you know, like they're looking for these like 1,000x plus investments. Like also like when you're talking to investors, like you need to have like it, don't lie to them, but it's just like you also have to understand that like they don't want a 10x win. Like a 10x win for them over 5 to 10 years is not a win for their fund, you know. It's like they're looking for, especially if you're going the venture capital route, they want 1,000x, you know. 1,000x pays for the whole fund and they all get money, you know. So it's like that's how they're looking at it. So it's like be honest with like what your like long-term vision is, and like if venture capital is even the answer, you could like totally take bank loans out, you can like open up a credit line, you can do all of these things if you're like more in the like, hey, like I just need a little bit of, or just go angel friends and family if you really believe and do this, or you know, like there's a lot of other options. Like venture capital, every fund, like it's not their money. Like, you know, it's like they have LPs that they have sold a fund to that has gotten filled. And their fund is like, we'll make X amount of investments and we expect to have to 5X, 10X your money. You know, so it's like if they have $100 million fund and they're making investments over 5 years and they said in 10 years, we're going to give you $1 billion back, you know, you going and making, you know, $10 million, you know, like a $10 million sale, and they invested $2 million, like that's not even going to take a big bite of that apple that they're promised, you know. And it's like if they don't deliver on that, they're not going to get another fund from these LPs, you know. So it's like you have to understand their game that they're playing as well as like what you're building. So it's like listen to other founders, like listen to like VCs talk, because like they'll tell their secrets, you know, like they'll tell what they're looking for. So yeah, I'd say that's the big difference. And then as I'll touch briefly on, this is all speculation though, but like for us raising this seed round, like our first metrics driven round, like we're looking at like a pathway to $1 million plus ARR in a year, you know, with like a very high margin business. You know, we're not having a ton of customers. We're also a data play. So it's like we can really like, depending on who the investor is, like let's say it's a Google or an Amazon, you know, it's like they're less concerned about what your revenue is because they make so much money. They're more interested in this, like these next generation of tools that they can add to their suite of services for these mega companies that already spend money with them. And they're looking, it's like, okay, what is your competitive advantage when it comes to collecting data, like which is one of the most valuable things in the world right now? What is your customer market look like? It's like, if we like, are you able to go and service an entirely new industry and be the winner in that with this amount of funding behind it? Because it's like, all right, if that works out, then they'd probably just acquire you because you're like building on top of their stack already. So it's like you have to like understand like what, like who you're talking to as well. Like some investors are a little bit they prioritize more of one thing than they do maybe traditional revenue. But I would say like as a baseline metric, if you're trying to raise like let's say 2 to like 5 million plus, like you like the baseline is like 100K, or like I would say what, like 60 to 70 to 100K a month recurring revenue with like $1 million in plus in ARR. But like for us, I would say like there's a little bit of grace. Like we're still trying for those metrics because we want to have like a very competitive advantage and we have a pathway there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more like, okay, like we also have these like super valuable things that are under our company. So it's like, because then the last thing, and like no one wants to think about this way, but it's like if they're investing in your company and you have this valuable IP attached and like you have this valuable customers and you have all of this like data, like if your company fails, like they still get that, you know? So like they'll just take that and be like, okay, we're going to write off the rest of this on our taxes. if you're like one of these larger companies, and then like we have like this super valuable software that we can put into our system, you know? So it's like, but it's like if you're like doing purchase orders and stuff like that, like for like a different type of company, like it's like then it's just tough because then they're just left with debt and they're just gonna have to bankruptcy, you know? So it's like just depends on like what type of company you are and like what protections you have, like what IP you have. So
Absolutely. And you touched on a couple of really nice things there too. Venture capital is definitely not something that's for everybody. So if you're not looking to be a company that is going to get to that 1000x return through grit, new
yeah,
markets, new tools, new ideas, there's nothing wrong with a good SBA loan to make
yep,
that incremental growth. And I think
yep,
being very honest with where you're at in business, what your real market looks like, who you're really trying to serve helps
hmm,
differentiate between the two. Because I think,
yeah,
while venture capital oftentimes looks really sexy, it
yeah,
comes with a few challenges on the back end as well,
yep,
and a lot of expectations. And I think you need to go into that with your eyes wide open and say, is this something that I really want? Like
yep,
a $20 million valuation is a big deal. And if you're
hmm,
not taking your company that direction, it's okay to go a different path.
yep,
And it's just finding out what works best for you there. And I think that's some great insight, especially around the monthly recurring revenue and what people are looking for there. And I think that's another thing that can be a little bit more difficult, especially in certain companies. And that's where it pays to really dive into your product. What are you
yeah,
doing? How are you selling it? How are you packaging things? And make sure it's structured in a way that's really palatable and people understand it.
yep.
Awesome.
So
Well, I
yeah,
definitely appreciate your insight. I have one final question for you before we
sure.
wrap up. I would love to know, what's one secret that you've learned as an entrepreneur and a founder that you wish you would have known starting out?
One secret. I think it's my thing about having a plan for your first customer. Like, I think it's really easy and it's easy to get lost in the big vision. Like, oh, in a couple years, we're going to be X, Y, and Z. But I think like every company that like I plan to build on in the future and after like things that I'm involved with, it's like it's not so much it's like what does the future look like. I think that's important, but I think the most important is like what does my first customer look like and what do we need to get them willing to pay us, you know? And like that thought experiment really allows you to cut a lot of things, like a lot of ideas away, because you're like, okay, like if my first customer, I'm going to go like let's check who is currently servicing these people. Oh, it's Microsoft, it's Apple, it's like one of these big players. It's like let's go back to the drawing board. So it's like, oh, you now are going and finding, okay, your first customer is being serviced by another startup, and you look at that startup and like you can differentiate, and they have like a higher pricing model. It's like, okay, can we accomplish
Connor?
something that they would be willing to switch off of and pay us something? And like, can we build a business model around maybe charging 70% of what the competitor is solving, you know? And like, how can we create feature differentiation, you know? So it's like we're in this like new tech wave where it's just like, especially in gaming, it's like there's like it's like V2, you know, it's like all of these companies like are building in a different way than like a lot of the services have been there. And like obviously like they're on it because it's hard to move off of it. But we've really outlined a great approach to be able to like have a competitive advantage when we're reaching out. It's like, hey, we see you're using this service. Are you open to a conversation on having us be your provider? Like we right off the bat, like we know that we're going to be half as much, and we provide these extra features. It's like right then and there, it's like you're going to get a conversation. So understand how to like really do that like thought experiment. How do you get your first customer? And like how are you like doing that pitch where it's like, and you have to have a business model around it. You can't have a business model of a company losing money, you know? So it's like you have to be like really honest. It's like, all right, we need to make X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, what's your pathway to $1,000 a month in reoccurring revenue? So it's like all these stack on top. It's like, who's your customer? What's your like competitive advantage in the market against the other providers? And like let's just say on the rare off chance, like you're building something that no one's building towards, figure out that reason why no one's doing it is because it's just such a new technology that like not enough people are out there, and maybe the people building are still in stealth. But if it's just like, if you're like, if you go through everything and you're the only one, like that would throw off like the sirens in my head, just to like take some extra time to understand why. Because there's a bunch of smart people, a bunch of people looking for opportunities, and like you have to understand why. Because like when you do eventually go to that venture thing, they're going to be like, if you're like, no one's building this, they'll be like, well, that's weird, why? Like it's much better to be like, there's like 5 other people building it and this is how we're differentiating it, or this is the big player in this space that hasn't innovated on their stack in a while, and this is how we're doing it differently, and we have a competitive advantage there. So it's like really do that and like figure out how you get to your first $1,000 a month, you know? So do that, and like I feel like you'll have a much higher success rate. So
That's a great insight. So you have given me loads to think about, especially around, venture capital, getting ready for going for your first round, all of the things involved there. So if others want to reach out to you, how is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
yeah, my socials at Connor Ellison, or my email, Connor, Connor, at POGR, POGR.io. Happy to answer any questions, bear with me, like now I've just been unlocked with my company. So like I'm doing tons of meetings all the time, and there's a million things on my to-do list, but like I'm happy to help other founders. Like make sure you come with like a like concrete idea. Don't just be like, can you help me? Like I'll still try and respond, but at the same time, it makes it my life a lot easier to help you if I'm answering a direct answer that like I have an expertise in. I also have a CTO that like I can definitely get some like technical feedback. Oh, can you review our demo? Oh, can you look at our deck? Like stuff like that. Don't make me the person that like needs to like do the legwork. I feel like that's something that I would offer as advice to anyone. Like anytime like I've earned a mentor, or I have people that like I've wanted stuff from, like I make their job super easy. Like they have like I'm making sure that like they don't have to do anything, and like the only thing they're offering me is like advice, and like or like bare feedback, and then I'm taking the notes. I have a recorder on the call. I'm making sure that like those 15 minutes or 30 minutes that I get with them are like extremely valuable, and like they feel like their time's not being wasted. Because if they feel that, like you're probably not going to get any more feedback from them. You want to make sure that like they feel like their time's respected. So
That's great advice. So thank you again for being on the show, and thanks to everybody to tuning into C-Suite Secrets. If you got as much value from today as I did, I would love it if you would do me a favor and hit that like or follow button. Until next time, thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you soon.